Good morning. Welcome to the April 13th, 2024 meeting of the Coalition of Little Rock Neighborhoods. I'm Kathy Wells, the president. I'm also with the Downtown Neighborhood Association. We'd like to go around the room and introduce ourselves.
Rick Weaver with the Downtown Little Rock area, Downtown Neighborhood Association.
Hi, I'm Chloe Chapman. I'm with Our Little Rock.
Mary Hemthorne, Ward 4.
Shana Chaplin with the Rockefeller Institute.
Who is our speaker today. We're very pleased to welcome her. Please notice of the two handouts that you picked up when you signed in twice. One is the recommendations titled page from the 40-page report on Arkansas Civic Health Index, which has been sent to you in a link as part of the meeting notice for today. You can get to the entire 40 pages. But this is and so therefore go out and do good page. The other one comes from, as it happens at the same time in my life, word from an activist who was part of an extremely successful campaign in Louisiana. And the backbone of their effort was the very simplest one. They asked people to pledge to vote this election year, period. Nonpartisan. You were to go check whether you were registered at your current address. They would assist you if you needed help to get in that condition. Then because you had pledged with this group, your standard group, it could be the Downtown Association for us, Rick. It could be the Civitan Clubs for Mary. It could be Chloe's group. It could be your church group. It could be anything. But within that group, you would have a few people keeping a list. And then when you start voting in the November early voting, you would be checking that these people had voted. They had a way to know daily who voted. We're working on getting that. We're working with Terry Hollinsworth, who's very intrigued with this whole possibility. We'll have to see what we can work out. But if somebody was intending to vote and their car broke down, you take care of it. If they need something else to clear the path to get to vote, you help them do that. And one of the great triumphs of this campaign in Louisiana was that there was a campaign for sheriff, special election. And the registration of that community was 47% black, which had wretched turnout. At the end of the day, 47% black voters who were registered turned out to vote because they were so vigorous in reaching every community leader and every civic group that had influence in that particular community. And I have hopes that we can take fire in this community and do the same thing. I do not think that Little Rock needs to take the back seat to Shreveport, Louisiana. So that's what this is about. It's as simple as what's said on the page. You've got the website there to give you the details about it. And I think it fits right in with what the recommendations turn out to be from Shana's group. So at this point, we turn the meeting over to Shana.
Thank you. And I apologize that I don't have my adapter to be able to show this on the big screen.
We can see it.
I know, like lessons learned when you get a new computer and it no longer have HDMI portal. But anyway, so just a little history on the Civic Health Index, which you have a link to, but you can also link to on our site, on the Clinton presidential site, and Cal's library system sites. So a group of individuals, all civic engagement professionals, were talking about sort of civic engagement in Arkansas, which includes voting, but is not limited to voting. So one, that's important for us at the Institute. And as we continue to watch the decline of volunteerism, of engagement in social groups, so those of you that like are in Civitan or Rotary or Kiwanis have probably also seen a decline in membership. As we watched voter registration and voter turnout decline in Arkansas, we wanted to really have an official study done. We all anecdotally knew the data, but we had never had an official report in the state of Arkansas. So collectively, with funding and through partnership, worked with the National Conference on Citizenship, which is out of Washington, D.C. They pull the data from the national organization around the census. Then we did some additional data work through the Clinton School and pulled together the first Civic Arkansas Health Report. So again, it doesn't just address voting, but it also addresses social connectedness, social spaces, civic spaces. It looks at volunteerism. It looks at philanthropy, all of that, which is all integrated. And for those of us that have worked in civic engagement space, especially the nonprofit space or volunteer space, have known that for years, but it's been difficult to get the political side of things to hear this side and understand that we all know and have known for 20 plus years that people who volunteer are much more likely to vote. People who volunteer are healthier. People who volunteer contribute more financially. People who volunteer are more likely to seek assistance from neighbors. They're more likely to pursue educational opportunities, all these things. And so as we watched volunteerism decline, it was no shock to this group of professionals that voting was declining. And what we have a tendency to do, I think, when we talk about voting declining and voter turnout declining is we have a tendency to then just immediately jump to solutions. And so we think, oh, it must be that poll lines are too long. Oh, it must be that people can't get to the polls. Oh, it must be, and we develop. And some of that may be true, but the reality is that we at the Institute have felt strongly about is that we actually haven't met the citizens to ask them why they're not voting. And I think in addition to some of those factors being possibilities, I think there is also probably some apathy, some fatigue, just around the massive amount of information. I think there's also some fear that exists. Lack of information, as we also know and track through the report, a decline in local media outlets, so local newspapers, and people no longer having access to the resources to be able to get accurate information, which leads to an increase in relying on social media for your information, which may or may not be good, which may draw you into really charged online conversations that then intimidate you. So as we looked at all those things, we had this report put together. We have a number of partners. Chloe is one of our first Civic Activator partners, so we've been asking organizations that are in this space to sign on with us, both to leverage their networks, potentially leverage their resources, to begin looking at the recommendations that you have in the report, but also some additional data mining that we want to do through the Institute. We have taken this on as Civic Arkansas because of the governor's legacy. And so if you know Governor Rockefeller's history, you know that when he came to Arkansas as a philanthropist and decided to buy the land up on top of the mountain and have a cattle ranch, he also, because of the philanthropy of his family, was deeply concerned about social issues in Arkansas. And as he began to learn about poor education system, corruption in our government at the time, prison corruption, he really felt like that somebody needed to take action. And at the time, we were a single-party state, which at that time happened to be Democrat.
I remember, and I went to some of those events.
Did you?
At the ranch.
Love it.
Back in my youth.
Back up. So again, he began seeking, wanted there to be alternatives, wanted Arkansans to have choice. And the more he got into it, the more he realized that just the level of stronghold of a single party, he wasn't able to find anybody that was going to run. So he finally just decided, I guess it's going to have to be me. And of course, he had financial ability and support to be able to do that. So he sought to do that. And interestingly, he was the first Republican. But what's important to us at the Institute is not necessarily what party he affiliated with. For us, what's important is that what he chose to do was offer Arkansans a choice. And he believed that more Arkansans needed to be involved and engaged. He believed citizens had a duty to be informed, had a duty to be engaged, and that's what he wanted. And so it happened to be Republican at the time, because that was how he could kind of bring in transformation into the system. So leaning into that history and the governor's legacy, that's what we want to do. We want to give Arkansans more opportunity. So let's go through just a little bit of the data and then talk about some of the challenges and how we think we can address them. So the quote that we lean into from the governor is that quote that every citizen has a duty to be informed, thoughtfully concerned, and to participate in the search for solutions. And so that's what we want to build, pathways for citizens to become involved. And we believe that we can do that first through local listening sessions. So that's one thing, as we get towards the end, I'll challenge you to help me figure out that space. How do we get disengaged people to the table to share with us why they're not engaged? Because we want to learn. So we have a couple of pillars to our own program. So we have the Civic Arkansas Activators that I've talked about, which Chloe is one. Organizations that are committed to this, committed to sharing their resources, to leveraging their networks. We have a thought leadership group that convened with us in February that will reconvene again with us in August, who's helping us to dissect all the information. We have listening sessions that we'll be launching in May, and we'll run listening sessions May through August across the state. In January, we'll be launching what we call a Civic Arkansas Commitment, which will include a monthly call to action over the 2025 year, which will include some really simple things like this. It's not rocket science, but it's just sort of challenging people, keeping it in front of them. We'll continue to have convenings at the ranch because, again, that's what the governor did. That's what he liked to do. He had over 200 convenings of groups at the ranch to help him solve local problems during his governorship. And then we'll continue to publish and fund civic health reports. So our anticipation is we'll do those every 2 to 3 years, and we hope that we will see some improvement in the data. So here's a little bit of the data, which is not all great.
Could we pause a moment?
Yes.
We have another come to the table.
Yeah.
Nanita, introduce yourself for the listening recording.
Hi, I'm Nanita Claiborne, and I'm the president of Petaway Neighborhood Association. Thank you.
Thank you.
So as you can see, here's some of the data and the big buckets that were looked at. So social connectedness is actually one of the strengths of Arkansans. And for those of us who live in Arkansas, we're probably not shocked by that. We're pretty friendly still. We have a lot of affiliations with each other. Some call this neighborliness. One of the things, though, that we are digging into around that data is how do people define that? Because it may actually be physical neighborhood like you represent. It may not be, though. It may be affiliation with Chloe's group. It may be your church is your neighborhood, and your church could be in another city, could be across town.
They often are.
Yeah.
If you do a voter canvassing, and you're in local races, and you'll run out and you'll put flyers on the hoods of cars at a church, they'll come out and they'll say, "Oh, we came from across town. We don't vote in this race."
Yeah.
There's a lot of that going on in this community.
Yeah, yeah. And so we need to be mindful of that. And again, that's some of what we want to learn about from citizens. Group involvement has declined in Arkansas, and so this is compared nationally. So 23%, and that is your civic organizations. So that's things like Civitan, Rotary, neighborhood associations, those sorts of things. Volunteering has declined and has continued to decline in Arkansas for the past 15 years. So we are now at 20.9%. In 2016, we were at 24%. So you can see the continued decline. Donating in Arkansas remains strong. We're a philanthropic state. And that is not based on a dollar amount. So it's not we give more money than everybody else, but it's the number of citizens that will actually give. And the threshold in the census data is that you give at least $25 a year to an organization. Now that can also include church, tithing, offerings. So again, we also know in many southern states that number is stronger, where you still have a strong Bible Belt and church affiliation. So again, have to be mindful of what goes behind the data and where and how people are engaging in this space. Discussing politics is on the decline. It's on the decline nationwide. We can probably all conjure a lot of reasons why we think that is. And this is specifically around even discussing politics with family. That we just see increasing divisiveness where people are not willing, even with friends and family, to talk about politics. We're not wanting people to discuss politics to debate or have, diabolical conversations. But if we're not even talking about politics, then how are we educating each other about the issues or about candidates? And so that's the concern there. Then you see trust in federal government is on the decline, although in Arkansas that has historically been a low number. We're kind of one of those wild, wild west states, along with Texas and Oklahoma and some of those that we kind of like to do our own thing, and we trust ourselves, and we don't have a lot of trust in federal government. So that has stayed fairly average for Arkansas. We've always been low in that nationwide. That number is declining. So what's happening is other states are kind of moving towards us in that space. Voter turnout, we are at 43.90%. That makes us 51st in the nation.
Say that again.
43.9%, and that makes us 51st in the nation, which is new for Arkansas. We've always been low, but we have never been next to last. So voter registration, however, is at 70%. So we actually have done some good work in Arkansas around voter registration, around access to voter registration. 70% isn't 100%, but 70% is a strong number. So again, part of what we want to do through our listening sessions is listen to people and find out what is the gap between voter registration and voter turnout. I will tell you that tracking the last preferential primary, which we know always is lower than average turnout, however, this year is significantly lower. Statewide, 20%. There were many counties that were 10%.
Say that again.
Statewide, only 20%. I think it was 20.7 officially. There were many counties, especially Delta area, that were 10%.
This is the one in March.
March.
Yes.
March 2024.
Yes. There were, as a result of that, there were also a number of runoffs. If you watched, especially eastern Arkansas, lots of runoffs. I mean, the lower the voter turnout, the greater likelihood of runoffs. A runoff, you're going to have even lower turnout than original. I mean, than in the first. So there's a lot of concern right now.
Was there any, call it exit polling or similar polling and the aftermath of this March election?
I have not seen anything yet.
Okay.
I have not seen anything yet.
So we're still
Yeah.
in the dark.
Yeah, yeah. It's very concerning because if 43% puts us at 51st, and we just faced 20% turnout What is it going to look like in November? And so it is very concerning for all of us. Some of the things I've seen happen that I thought were some good tactics was, for example, in Arkadelphia, and I can't think now that county or district, sorry, they literally started publishing, instead of percentages of people that turned out, because they too faced a number of runoffs, actual numbers of people that meant. So you saw some messaging coming out in community that was not partisan messaging, but was messaging like, we just let 3,000 people decide who represents us.
That has resonance when I speak with people, because I will make a strong pitch for making sure that you register and you vote. Mm-hmm. And if I get one of those shrugs, well, it doesn't matter, it doesn't count, I'll say, well, that's okay. I'm going to go vote, so I'm going to decide how your government budgets money and decides policy. And at that point, they kind of twitch, and they don't really like to be faced that directly with the notion about the outcome of their not bothering to vote. Mm-hmm. And they may suspect that what I vote for isn't what they might vote for. So I give you a gift of that proposal.
And I think it was powerful. You know, I think when you begin to talk about things, percentages can sound bad, but they may not resonate with us. But if you have, you know, a population of 50,000 and only 10% show up to vote, and you say to people, we have a population of 50,000 and 5,000 people just decided for all of us who our mayor is, who our state representative is, who our quorum court leader is, who 2 of our city council members are, that begins to resonate when you put it in those kind of numbers. So I think, one, that's a space that local groups can lean into and begin to think about, how do we communicate this information differently and work on. These next slides just compare us, again, to some of the top states, because part of what we do want to show is it's not like there's a state anywhere in the country that's just doing phenomenal. So while our numbers don't all look great, when you compare them to the top state, we're bad but not horrible. Let's put it that way. So as again, voter registration in Oregon is 82.7, whereas 62.2 in Arkansas. One of the things you'll note too, this also helps us to look at what are they doing in Oregon differently. If you have kept up, you know that in Oregon State and Washington State, mail-in ballots are across the board.
I'm interested to hear how that works without the, I gather from the absence of scandal headlines, turning into a way for clever ballot thieves to manipulate in some fashion mail-in voting.
And I don't know, I mean, I have not dug in yet to see how they're doing it in both those states. But to your point, neither of those states had any
scandal
headlines. Both increased voter turnout. And so I'm, really curious. And if you talk to people in those states, they have a lot of trust that the process was very fair and very secure. So I think, again, looking at this kind of data then also helps us to look to where do we need to be looking at some solutions? What are some models? What dialogues and what questions do we need to be asking?
Just as a point of information, do you have a copy of the Marlon Hawkins book published in the 60s about how he regularly stole elections? He was a power in the Democratic machine.
And he was from Morrilton.
And
where Governor Rockefeller moved. Like coincidence there.
Oh yeah, they had some real
Hawkins
contentions.
are still really strong.
Yes, but he published an actual account of the way that they did it, and it was basically behind closed doors when the polls closed. And they would vote literally to graveyards, and they would vote some people twice. All the classics you've heard about all your life. But there is a how-to manual if you care to do that, which I understand some other countries have purchased and followed as a how-to manual. So where you hear that the elections aren't clean over yonder, Marlon Hawkins' book may have been their guide.
Wow.
But it should be in your library.
Surprised. And it's probably in the archives.
Speak to that. Because even if just on the numbers question.
Yeah.
A relatively small number of the voters today have any understanding of this, have seen it, or know about Marlon Hawkins by name, like I do. That is in the air. It's in what they've received in their
Yeah.
family discussions. It's one reason they don't trust government.
Yeah.
They may not have learned the origin of that.
Yeah.
I want to bring that to your
Yeah.
attention.
And I bet it is in the Rockefeller archives, just because there was an integration, with all of that, and his decision to run. Trust in federal government, Rhode Island has the highest number, but as you'll see, that is still only 63%. So again, we're at 35%, but if you consider highest in the nation is only at 63, and that is a decline for Rhode Island, even. Discussing politics, no surprise, Washington, D.C. district that's included in census data is the highest, probably because it's what they all do, right? So, like, how could you live there and not discuss it?
You buy
Kind of
your house,
scary
you
that
don't
it's only
know.
62%, even in a place where that's all they do. But anyway,
Say that again. 62%.
62%. Donating, Minnesota actually leads the nation. They have led the nation really probably the past 10 years. Minnesota and Utah, 61.8%. And again, we're at 52.4%. And again, keep in mind, that is just simply owning that you write a check of at least $25 to something, to some organization. Volunteering, Utah continues to rank highest, 40.7. There's a lot of speculation about that. Obviously, a part of it has to do with the church in Utah and the mandate for volunteering as a part of membership of that church. So people in Utah would tell you, no, that's not why. We're just, all of Utah loves to volunteer, but there's a lot of research in that space.
I don't think that's true.
So again, even volunteering, but it is concerning. Arkansas continues to decline, and actually since 2016, we've declined at a faster rate than we were up to 2016. And again, why we're including that number, one, volunteering is the first place most people engage. So if we're talking about getting people civically involved, the likelihood of getting somebody to step out their front door and voting be the first thing they do is slim to none. I mean, you're going to find an anomaly in every community, but that's really not the path. So if we want people to move to voting, what we need to think about is what we look at that's called the citizen continuum. And the citizen continuum starts with a person who is completely uninformed, disengaged. Their first step is simply social connectedness. Do they even engage with neighbors? Do they have any sort of social connectedness? Second step is volunteering. Third step is they move beyond volunteering to actually possibly attending public forums, being engaged in a civic organization, securing membership in something. Then you begin to see momentum towards voting. So I think, again, it's really important for us when we talk about voter turnout, when we talk about people being politically engaged, to not just jump to those conclusions or solutions that are simply about transportation, lines, access. We need to also be thinking about what's really happening with each person and how can we begin to encourage them. And again, I think that's where neighborhood associations are a great place. I mean, what better place to kind of have your first step into doing something, right, than in your neighborhood. And so if we can begin to get people assimilated into community in that way, we have a better chance then of when we then approach them with, now we're challenging you to actually go vote, having success in that. Group involvement.
Just as a point of
yes.
information, there's a couple of elements in play there. One is you would all support going to vote because you know and trust each other, and you've done some things in your neighborhood activity. You've done projects, whether it's a community garden, and you very quickly move to, in fact, what is a pivot in this coalition of neighborhoods. We are speaking with a collectively louder voice, which is we represent a lot of voters, to get more and better from City Hall and other levels of government.
Yeah.
We're one of the few that looks at all of them, and we think that they should be paying more attention to each other
Yeah.
with their tax dollars. But you very quickly realize that the coin of the realm in getting more and better from City Hall or any government that we want as a neighborhood, more budget, more attention, whether it's fixing the drainage problems, fixing the potholes, doing more community policing in a way that we like, getting those vacant houses dealt with, the illegal dumping stopped on the vacant lots, all of those very pertinent issues that affect the block you live on.
Yeah.
So you talk about it's right personal to me, comes back to how powerful a voting block are you. You're leaving gold on the ground is the phrase I'm always using if you are not registering and you're not voting. And we have in the Little Rock precincts a comparison where some vote at 3 times the turnout as others. But we know we have one man, one vote. So those folks who aren't turning out are not only leaving gold on the ground, they are reducing the possible influence at City Hall because the squeaky wheel and the high voting precincts and neighborhoods do get the attention. It's just the natural influence of the fact that these are elected officials.
Yeah.
So they want to placate, they want to be considered a friend, they want to be considered responsive to larger blocks of voters. So this is a very nice combination that supports a variety of things,
Yeah.
I would submit.
Yeah, I agree. Group involvement, Maine was the highest, but again, you can see it's not that anyone in the nation has a super high number, 38.7. This has dropped significantly with Gen Z. There's a lot of research out there about why. Some of it goes back to trust. Some of it goes back to just being more sort of nomadic in nature. A lot of it also goes to that what they are looking for is more work-life balance. So they are looking for employment opportunities that give them those opportunities for engagement. So they're not necessarily looking for, I want to have a job over here, I want to have affiliation over here, and then I want to do this over here. They want it sort of all in one nice little package. And so as a result of that, you've seen a lot of increase. Even in Arkansas, we've watched, Walmart, for example, really kind of shift and change corporate social responsibility models. So the old model of, every corporation would go out and have a big day of service. Like we probably all remember that. And they'd have their matching shirts on and it'd be on the news and you got...
And they would transform a
one
school
thing, yeah.
or some other worthy charitable
Right.
cause. And
Yes.
everybody thinks it's nice that we have this working
Yeah.
in the community.
Yeah.
And
But
you
it's
leave
a
at the end of the
one
day
day.
and it looks
Yeah.
spiffy. And everybody goes away.
Yeah. And so we've seen a shift from that. And again, Walmart's been a leader in this and Entergy, Blue Cross, a shift away from that to providing actual hours of, paid time for people to go volunteer. Committees led by employees of how are we going to donate? Where are we going to invest? We've seen increased encouraging and support of civic education and around giving employees opportunity to run for and serve on the city council or quorum court. So things like that. That has in great part been driven by this decline in group involvement nationwide. It's also been driven by the COVID period when we also had lots of critical social issues, race issues emerge, where corporations were also hit very strongly with the power of the cancel culture. And much of that is driven by Gen Z, and looking at that, millennials, Gen Z, that impact and knowing that's the workforce coming in. They are not content to one day go serve and make a, impact. What they're looking for, again, is how do I integrate this into what I'm doing, have this a part of my life. They want time off. There's data that shows as they look for jobs, they're not even necessarily comparing salaries as much as like my generation did. What they want to know is, like, how much time off do I get? Do I
Quality
get to
of life.
volunteer? Quality of life issues. So again, I think all of that is important to know and consider as we look at this number. Social connectedness, again, was a strength of Arkansas. Surprisingly, or at least this surprised me, Washington, D.C. reports at the highest with social connectedness at 88.2. Again, I think that there's, in my mind, I would think, are those genuine connections in D.C.? But I don't want to
Could you please define that? Are we just talking about going on Facebook?
So, well, that's part of what we want to dig into. So social connectedness was measured through the census for the first time this last census. Yes, it's never been measured before, and it was something we added at the request of civic engagement professionals across the country. And so it's not well defined, which is part of what we want to do in our listening sessions. It's defined loosely around just, do you connect with people in community? It doesn't define how that connection happens. So that's some of what we want to ask when we're in local community. And again, neighborliness, social connectedness, again, you may even define that differently. We may define neighborhood different. So digging into that, but again, strong in Arkansas, what that tells us is that's something we have to build on. If people are connected, hey,
Welcome.
then we do have
Sign in and Pete the Highness.
opportunity
handouts.
to do some,
Sessions you told us about?
yes, yeah. So part of how we're approaching it through Civic Arkansas, which for the Rockefeller Institute is a long game initiative. So this is not a 1 year done thing. This is probably not even our typical 2 to 3 year program. We see this as a long game initiative of the Institute. And again, a part of what we do well, because we model after the governor's process, is that we are able to convene people well. We're fortunate to be seen as a trusted entity. We're not politically affiliated. We're not government. And so people will often convene with us when they might not show up at the table to convene with others. And then we have trained facilitators who we train in what we call the Rockefeller Ethic to walk people through how to break down some of those barriers, have civil dialogue, move past our differences to find out what our commonalities are, and then reach some agreement on some things that we can agree to work on. So we may know, for example, in voting and voter registration, there's without a doubt on the conservative side a movement nationwide to not necessarily want to see that number grow. There's movement to, you have to be a paid member of the party to get to register to vote. We've seen those laws places. Yeah, there was conversation about that here in Arkansas.
Pause.
Yes.
We want to welcome a newcomer and ask her to introduce herself for our recording on Facebook.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Terry Hollingsworth, and I guess I'm supposed to say I'm the Pulaski County Circuit and County Clerk.
And I've been talking to you about voter registration
Yes, ma'am.
and getting turnout lists. So we're very welcome here today. Thank you for coming.
And Terry, I've got that overall slide up for you just to see some of the data. So we know there are big differences. And so our goal at Civic Arkansas is to be able to bring all those voices to the table. For me to be most successful in leading Civic Arkansas, I need every voice, and I need the extremes. I need a MAGA person at the table as much as I need as far liberal as you could go on the other side person at the table. We know there are going to be challenges with that. We know that the staff have to be well trained to manage dialogue then and facilitate conversation. But for us, it's about learning and trying to understand. I would love to understand. My own political affiliation historically is conservative. I myself would love to understand how we have gotten where we have gotten, because I don't understand it. And I would be one of those people in this environment that would tell you, I feel I have no party at this moment in time.
Are you familiar with the Braver Angels Civic Dialogue Group?
Yeah.
That sounds like the sort of a thing that you're interested in taking part in or fostering.
Yeah, and they're one of our civic activator.
So you've
organizations.
recruited them already.
Yes. Yep.
What's it called?
Braver Angels, which refers to a Bible verse about they are the ones that go where no one else will, essentially. I'm butchering it, but there's members of my church are trained in this managing the dialogue, where ranges of views are invited to a table to discuss how they might speak with those with what they consider to be very extreme views and opposing their views. And the ticket of admission is that you agree to have civil discourse. And then they take you through it.
Yeah, they pick topics each month. I think it's at Fletcher Library, right? Am I
It
getting the
is.
library right?
I believe it is
Fletcher,
braverangels.org.
Yeah.
And I've got an invitation to the most recent one that I will forward to you, so you can get connected. There's a national chapter, and then there's a little
Yeah,
white bunch.
and they have a group in Northwest Arkansas as well, and I think they've launched a group Southern Arkansas, and because of the national dialogue and because of the growing discord, we are seeing, in reality, lots of organizations emerge that are around this sort of data and information. So again, it's, I don't know that we're doing something extremely unique in Arkansas, although I do think, there are only 33 states that have a civic health report. Many of those states, the approach has been sort of very academic through university systems or through sort of think tank groups around disseminating information, training. Our approach that we're taking is trying to be much more granular, and again, starting with hosting these listening sessions to actually get citizens to the table to begin to try to dig into some of this information and hear from them, because our approach at the Institute is we can't develop solutions until we actually know the why behind some of this. And we can either move forward continuing with assumptions, which has been a lot of how we've tackled things in the past, or we can try to dig deeper. Now, we know that's a huge challenge, and that's why groups like you all, groups like Braver Angels, group like the Divine Nine, group like churches are going to be key to us. Again, for me to be successful, I need a very diverse population to show up for the listening session. I also need, frankly, people that aren't engaged to show up to tell me why they're not engaged, which is like the hugest challenge of all, right? But when we know that in Arkansas we have more than 80% of our population not even engaged in volunteering, much less voting, that's an issue. And I assure you, I've been in this business 30 years, we will not improve voting turnout if we continue to ignore people not volunteering and that number declining. Because again, your chance of moving somebody from sitting in their house, not being socially connected, not involved in any way in community, to showing up to vote is slim to none. That is a huge gap. Take a person who's at least helped clean up a park, made some social connections, begun to hear about, learn about issues, moving them towards voting, much greater chance. So it's, again, our challenge to people is let's not look at this just about lines at the polls, which frankly, Terry and her group have done a fantastic job with.
I don't know. Thank you.
It's, when I have family in Nashville, Tennessee. I've got family down in Texas and Houston and Dallas. And it is not hard to vote in Arkansas. We have great early voting processes and opportunities.
Okay.
To me, we do compared to a lot of other places.
Okay.
Yeah, you get on the national scale, and gosh, we look great
We do. You know. So again, I think
because it's a national scale that stinks.
yeah. Did my computer just die?
Well, I agree that the national scale might stink and there's some room for improvement, but if the way they're inching the legislators here in Arkansas,
Yeah.
I was just going to do more than stink.
Yeah.
It's already pretty terrible in my opinion, especially for seniors who don't get out.
That
Especially
category
as it relates to early voting and trying to get your ballot back or even request a ballot or anything like that. And not just seniors, people who don't have the ability to
They're not
navigate that. They're not mobile to navigate that particular process. I'll put it that way. And then, and God forbid, you have a heart attack today and you wanted to go vote, tomorrow.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, those kinds of things like that. So.
I'm wondering if that might be a particular successful approach on this pledge to vote idea that they run so successfully in Louisiana, which is the other handout. And it's very simple within your group, like your civic club, your neighborhood association, your church. You simply speak to someone who's promoting pledge to vote, and you sign up and you say, I'm going to pledge to vote. And then that gives you, you give them permission to kind of follow up with you. Well, did you get out to early voting? Well, my car broke down. Well, we'll give you a ride. And all of that sort of a thing. And as I think I'm correct on this, there is typically a higher voter turnout among seniors who have gotten the practice. So if we look at the subset of seniors who aren't mobile, who can be brought into a pledge to vote program, then you've got a bunch of folks enabling them to get to the polls, basically because they will transport them to the polls. And then you don't get such a turnoff from the very cumbersome absentee voting paperwork. Is that something we should pursue, do you think?
Well, I think that's helpful, but I think that a lot of people, if they're not able to leave their homes, they have to have the absentee process. Or if they're not able
I'm
to
not
leave
even
those,
mobile enough to get
right,
in the
they're
car.
not even mobile enough to do that kind of thing. So then they have to have that particular process. And now the process is so cumbersome. So if you help a person, even call to get a ballot, to pick up their ballot, or that person has to fill out paperwork.
Yeah.
I mean, so that's, to me, more cumbersome than it used to be, whereas you could probably just go pick up a ballot for your neighbor
I did that.
And-
Yes, I know what you're saying.
and be with no problem. But now you got to sign your name that you helped this person, and you can't help more than like 3 people.
Yeah.
So it's nuts.
No, it's voter suppression. Let's call it what it
Okay,
is.
that is voter suppression, yes, ma'am.
I have a question about that with the disabled or elders, whichever. When they do get to the ballot, do they get first dibs to move to the front of the line?
Sure.
Okay, because
Sure.
I wasn't sure about that, and I
They-
would think that would be only fair if,
You
you
can
know,
ask to advance down the line.
You can pass the advance to the front of the line.
and you would talk to the people that's working the polls, or? Okay, I wasn't sure about that.
Always ask. The worst they'll say is no, and they'll probably be polite about it.
Right.
So you have the list of recommendations. These are some initial recommendations that were compiled sort of by our partnership when we published the report. But again, for the Institute, these were not necessarily the sum of all recommendations. And these are not all things that we can take on, which is why, again, we have our civic activators, which is why we have our thought partners. Because our hope is that as we move this initiative forward, we have corporations statewide, we have civic organizations that begin to review this data with us, engage in this dialogue, hear back. We're committed to in August, we'll have a convening at the Institute to present what we've learned at the local listening sessions throughout the summer. And then bring that information back to be able to say, what pieces can everybody take? Because it's going to take all of us owning pieces, sort of building our own Civic Arkansas pillars in this space to actually kind of move this forward. So, county clerks can continue to work on voter registration and voter turnout and things like that. There may be some neighborhood associations or things that can support them in that effort to educating citizens and giving volunteer opportunities again, because if we don't start building the volunteer pipeline, getting people into service where you learn about, make connections, it's going to be really difficult to move them along that pathway. We have
The 1 cent sales tax proposal coming from Mayor Scott in the city of Little Rock is a stimulating force, because all of our neighborhoods have an interest in what he proposes, what our neighborhoods might get out of it or fail to get out of it. And that takes you back very quickly to, you need to have high registration and high turnout, because there will be something that concerns your neighborhood on this November ballot.
Yeah.
So my question in terms of your recommendations, I'm not seeing, and maybe I'm overlooking it, but is there a recommendation for like the school system, be it public or private, to make sure that they beef up, I was going to say civil rights, that's not the word. I'm talking about civics education.
Yeah, numbers.
Because civics education, to me, involves the volunteering aspect that you're talking about,
Right.
and also being involved in not only your neighborhood, your city, county,
Number
state, that kind of
6.
thing. Okay, number 6 speaks to that.
Number 6 addresses that, and that is where the Clinton Center has committed to being our lead civic activator in that space. So they are ramping up their opportunities for civic instruction to teachers. The state chamber has taken on the national chamber-initiated Civic Bee. So there was a Civic Bee that was launched in 2022, started out of Oregon, again, where voter turnout is the highest.
Tell us more about defining that.
Civic Bee. So the Civic Bee is run like a spelling bee. So we've all watched the National Spelling Bee on TV,
Okay.
right? So it's run exactly the way the National Spelling Bee is run, but it is civics. It's a Civic Bee. And so Oregon launched it. The National Association of State Chambers, the U.S. State Chamber, has now funded it. And Lowell Rogers Chamber was the first chamber here in Arkansas that elected to adopt it. And so they hosted the first one, then the state chamber adopted it, hosted a regional, and then in May, the state chamber will be hosting the statewide Civic Bee at the Clinton Center, with the Clinton Center supporting, and then the Winthrop Rockefeller Institute is backing it, so we're one of the sponsors fiscally and just promotionally for that. So it's another space, and some of that is also being launched that while we know we have challenges about how to get things into schools and addressing curriculum and education, these are other mechanisms and ways to sort of grow some of that civic knowledge, while there may also be moves for some policy decisions and some advocacy. But in lieu of waiting for things to happen only one way through government, what are some other mechanisms and avenues where we can challenge people, challenge students, try to grow that? So that has launched, and I'm excited to see that launch in Arkansas. For the first time, you can go on the U.S. Chamber website and see other states that are involved in this. But I think that, speaks to one avenue and way that we can begin to improve that. The Clinton Center has a number of other things. They already do some teacher education in this space. They'll be partnering with some other national organizations to bring increased teacher education. They are already lead for the state in Global Youth Service Day. They're going to expand that to a broader target. President Clinton has a dream himself of that every 9th grade student would come through that library and through a mock election every year. So they have that sort of in their planning mode. And so again, they've kind of agreed to take the lead civic activator-wise in this space, Terry, of trying to kind of grow that. We also are working with the Arkansas Press Association.
Question on the Civic Bee, what
Yes.
ages are your
It is,
participants?
I think it's 9th through 12th
I was gonna
grade,
say
but
probably
it,
ninth grade.
it may be 7th through 12th. I'd have to go back and look.
I need to start at pre-K. I mean,
Well,
just like
they
you
need
learn
to go
play-
with mama voting.
Right, exactly. That's what
Yeah.
I'm saying. Because
Yeah.
it's got to be in the household.
Yeah.
It's got to be. So it's almost like an indoctrination, if you want to use that word.
Well, no, it's just
Yeah.
you're raised on it.
Yes, you're raised on it. It's part of your value.
State
That's what
Representative
it's got to be.
District
Part of
80,
the value.
Denise Ennett, who is downtown, who is my own representative, is a woman with children of her own in her own household, who I saw grow up attending downtown neighborhood association meetings at her mother's knee, literally. So that model is exactly what you're talking about. She was raised on it.
Yeah.
And when she reached this point in her life that she could turn her attention to it, she was already educated, primed, prepared, and what's more, she knew she could do it.
Yeah.
There wasn't the fear, well, I can't do that. I don't know how to do that. She'd seen the neighborhoods fumbling through to success for years, which is what local government really is, honestly.
Our Representative Clark Tucker, too. His school friends called him Mr. President.
So one of the things I would challenge you all as we are looking, so we, our initial listening sessions for May have been set, but we are looking at setting our June listening sessions. In Little Rock and Pulaski County, we would like to have multiple sessions. We think that's the best way to reach people here. So one, I would just challenge you guys to join me in being thought partners about, how do we incentivize people coming to let us hear their voice? Part of what we want people to know is that we want to hear their voice. Again, our hope is that we're seen as trusted partners because we're not a part of government. We're not a partisan entity, and that we want them to see some of this data and know that we want to learn from them. Sort of, what are the barriers for you? What's keeping you from being involved? We also, like I said, are working with the Press Association, who's really interested. There's a lot of interest around the decline and demise of local newspapers and access for information, and so there's an interest in starting some nonprofit newspaper programs where we're able to reinvigorate some local media, as well as just, I think there are some, of the existing even statewide or regional newspapers that want to lean into this space in a more nonpartisan way, as much as you can be. I'm one of those people that says nonpartisan really doesn't exist. We all lean one way or the other. We're all partisan in some way.
Unless you quit and dropped out
just
from
give
discuss,
up. Yeah.
which conversations we've all had.
Yeah. But as much as possible, I think there is an interest in, among print media especially, of how do we ensure we are getting people just good information. I saw for myself in the recent election, provincial primary, so many judicial candidates in that race. I'm well versed in this space. I served on school board. I've been through an election process myself. I could barely find information about the judges to feel like I could make an informed decision. So I'm on the phone calling all of my lawyer friends, all of my other judge friends, which just, made me realize, again, and League of Women Voters is one of our partners, but dialogue around, we have a real gap in the state of information about just, factual information about candidates. In Texas, you could log on to League of Women Voters and you can find the bio on every single candidate down to city council. I could find out in Texas background of every judicial candidate by going to League of Women Voters site. You can't do that in Arkansas.
I want to say at this point, I'm very proud that our Coalition of Little Rock Neighborhoods conducted a candidate forum for judicial candidates as well as
Good.
local races.
Yeah.
That remains, I believe, on our Facebook page at clrn.ar.
Good. I'll go back and
And we had, I believe, all but one candidate appear, which showed you how hungry they were for a chance to
tell.
be
Yeah.
appearing in the room. And as we know, you don't get great crowds in the room. So once again, we did a live stream, and once again, we posted this recording online, and there were several hundred viewings.
Wow.
Were there not, Mary, the last I looked?
It's been a while since I've looked, but I'm sure there,
Yeah.
yes.
Which is to
there's a
say
lot of
far
viewing.
more
There-
than
Had
a lot of
most
shares.
halls
Had a lot
that
of
might have had
activity.
a forum.
I was getting the notices.
And so we contributed to
Yeah,
that.
that's great.
And they were pleased. And we are hardly great technical and skilled producers of live streaming and
Yeah.
recordings.
Yeah.
But it got the face on the recording, their voice, they spoke for themselves.
Yeah.
We had a couple of questions. In fact, I have to pause for a moment. We asked what I thought was a wonderfully wicked question, because after they introduced themselves and said, I'm candidate X, and this is my wonderful background, and I have these years of experience, and you should vote for me, we said, question, why should we vote for you instead of your opponent? Which really put them on the spot. What do they say?
They hate that.
Well,
No, I'm just saying.
they
that's
certainly
a
did.
answer, yeah.
And there was one young woman candidate who was I think there was an appeals court candidacy. I've forgotten, but at any rate, one of the higher levels of the courts, and she said, "Well, I want you to know that there was an obstacle in jury instructions, and they weren't including something, and someone complained to me about it." And so I took up the cause, and the officials on this jury instruction writing committee, deep into professional weeds here, ignored me. So I kept on writing, and I kept on persevering, and now that jury instruction for the state of Arkansas includes this new information. They should be included. So she found a way to distinguish herself in the
Yeah.
pack without throwing off
Right.
on
Big
opponents,
ugly,
which
yeah.
is the big challenge. And it was very clever because she's the only one of all those 17 that managed that trick.
Wow.
And it was a woman candidate, which I'll confess I have a bias in favor of. So I commend that to your attention.
Yeah, that's great. So any questions about the data or any thoughts even in the room around as we move forward trying to do listening sessions to, and again, our interest in this is because we truly want to try to get to some of the root causes of what's happening so that we can bring back to our thought partners and our civic activators sort of here's some of the root cause information. Now, how can we approach this?
What about the bios online? We've got the UA system putting out neutral information, which I subscribe to and pass along in my network, which focuses, first of all, in this season on the proposed amendments to the Constitution that are being collected and proposed, and how those fights are going on and allowed and not and so forth. But it moves on to more particular information later. But that doesn't reach the factual database that you spoke about. That doesn't seem to me that hard. Can you get that done?
I don't know. I mean, that isn't something the Institute could do. We would love to be able to support one of our, another partner, a civic activator partner. Cooperative Extension is one of our partners, and they were at our February convening, as Chloe was, and they are interested in expanding on what they already currently offer, which I do think is really good.
I don't believe
for
that they can do
but they
candidates.
can't do candidates.
Right.
They can't do individual candidates, and they have capacity issues like everyone. the person who compiles all that also compiles all the research for their programmatic efforts and for 4-H. So I think one, it's some capacity issues, which again, our hope is that as sort of the conveners of this, then we can begin to elevate and raise to corporate organizations, foundations, people that are interested in helping to fund in this space, what some of the gaps are that they
But
might
League of Women
build.
Voters, which does it in Texas, seems like a very obvious.
Yes,
Prospect.
except that in Arkansas, they are not well organized, is what I have found.
So
They don't have connection between, like, Northwest League of Women Voters and Central Arkansas League of Women Voters.
You just need somebody
So I live.
that says, hand me the money and I'll hire the tech, and then we will,
Yeah.
hire the little volunteer interns,
Yeah.
probably teenagers, as the
You
way the
gotta have
world
some money,
turns.
Kathy. You gotta have money to do that.
I've had
Well,
this
I'm
question
sure the
before.
Institute can assist with the money.
Well, I've had the question before. I lived in Massachusetts for 13 years,
okay.
and their Secretary of State put out a great pamphlet that's like, I work at Cooperative Extension
Those have
Service.
been,
I know
yeah.
Kristen
Yeah.
who does
Okay.
Yeah.
the newsletter, but
Yeah.
I've always wondered why we don't have any mechanism like that in our state government.
Oh, because they don't want to give advantage to candidates. It
It's
can
their
be
decision,
nowhere
but-
near any level of government. It's going to have to be a private, nonprofit sponsor. But we know that there exist those that are interested, and I don't see that the lack of organization that you refer to is really a hindrance. You just need somebody that's willing to put some attention and some hours into it, but give them the money, and they're going to have to go hunting for the technical ability to
Right.
do it,
Yeah.
and create the website and do the system operation of the website, which is all readily available if you go looking for it, surely.
I think the Secretary of State just had done it.
Yeah, I agree, because there are several states where Secretary of State
Because
has
when
done it.
when candidates file, you get all the information on that candidate, their website information, their socials handles nowadays,
For the
they
data
have-
Which
fair.
they do not
I mean,
post on their filings, because I don't mind the filings. I do that because I want to invite people to my candidate forum.
But when because I know that
'Cause
we've
they may have
done,
it, Terry,
at
but
least
they
on
keep
my
it to
site,
themselves.
we've at least, the candidates that file with the Placer County, we've at least tried to put them on our website. I don't know if we did it this cycle, but I know we've done it before.
You did better
And so
than the
we-
state did.
We got it, but it's hard, it's hard because people want everybody's information and we only have the ones who file, for
Right,
Placer
right,
County.
right.
But like you said, the Secretary of State has all that information from across the.
But have you looked at a filing? They keep it to themselves. There's like 4 lines in the filing, and they frequently will leave something blank, like phone numbers. I got phone numbers from the county clerk's office that I was not able to get off a state filing for candidate X.
Again, I think that's more of a choice.
I don't know.
And that's not helpful.
Right.
I would think if you're running for office, you would submit to that kind of publicity, but that's just me, I guess.
I'm curious about the June listening sessions.
Yeah.
How are you, do you have dates? Do you have, I
We
know
don't.
you
I
said,
mean, we're leaning into partners for those. So,
I
for
see.
example, the May sessions, the mayor in West Memphis reached out, said we're working with him in Clinton, Van Buren County. We're working with the county judge, was really interested in this. He's interested in wanting to reinvigorate more citizen committees and things in his county. And so in Arkadelphia, we're working with city clerk and the university, Henderson University there. So it's kind of different champions.
Yeah.
We provide the information. We're providing all of the outreach information, all of that. We'll host it wherever. Our preference is if we can find free space to host it, great. If not, I mean, I can pay for space. We're paying for food, beverages, whatever that means in West Memphis. 6 o'clock is a time that they felt like community responds and is used to, so we'll be probly doing like
Classic, yes.
you know.
You break bread together.
Yes.
There's all these
Food gets
forces
in there.
at play.
So yeah, we are open to any kind of partner. What we know is local champions are going to help us be able to reach local citizens better, and we also were open to going back. West Memphis area has asked us to come in May, but then they're interested in us coming back in August. We'll also be hosting listening sessions at all of the U of A higher ed institutions, both 2-year and 4-year.
Extension, have you all thought about, we have a great space.
Y'all do have,
Nice
great
parking lot
spaces.
right off the university.
Yeah, you're talking about the
Yeah.
South University building?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's an
Yeah.
excellent building. What about Philander Smith and its Social Justice Institute?
Yeah, that would be a great.
They've got that big, are you, by the way, what size groups are you trying to get assembled? I forgot to ask.
Well, I mean, we're prepared to pivot and have facilitators to accommodate whatever size. I am, honestly, if I had 30 show up at some of these initials, I would count that a huge success. Just knowing how difficult it is to get people present. We are open to as small as 10. My goal that I've kind of set for our community partners is at least 30, which again I think is a huge success. But we can accommodate more than that. I mean, I can bring in any number of facilitators to.
So you
manage
could
the conversation.
sustain a large number of volunteer hosts. For example, we are the most populous city and county.
Yeah.
So it looks to me like we ought to be creating quantity, not only the cooperative extension one, but the Philander Smith one, and several more that we could think of if we just had a minute. And you could say yes to all of that with food and drink at 6 o'clock at night. I think that is definitely the idea.
Yeah.
Are you trying to set it, promise that we'll be out at 7, or what is your time limit?
90 minutes.
90 minutes.
90 minutes. Because our full facilitation process in it, some of the information we're gathering via some electronic polling that we're able to do, and then much of it will be dialogue. So 90 minutes we know gives us time for people to kind of get settled, leaves us a full hour for actual deliberative dialogue.
And it would be a dialogue with the entire group.
Yeah, yes. We'll facilitate it.
To make sure everybody's
Yeah.
included. Yeah,
Yes.
that's always so critical.
Yeah.
And then what kind of questions would you ask, and what do you do with this information?
The information we're going to compile and give back to the local community, all of it will be compiled aggregately for an August convening, which will be a reconvening of the 60 plus people that came in February, may include some additional partners, to really kind of then dig into what we found. So
Will that be live streamed online or recorded and posted later for absent friends?
We'll do we probably won't live stream that one, but we'll publish a report at the end of it, just like we have a report from the February convening.
You
that
should
we
think
published.
about a recording.
And we might, yeah. Sometimes for us, the integrity of hearing the voice of people outweighs recording, because we will sometimes have people that will disengage if they know we're recording. And especially we have found in this space. So that was the reason we didn't record the first one. We had some people in this space, unfortunately, which for me, that's been in this field for 30 years, it's disheartening that the word civic has become political. But it has. I left. I was with the Governor's Commission on National Service and Volunteerism, and frankly, I left that position to take this position at the Rockefeller Institute so that I could do this work, because I could not do it there. And so we've also tried to be very mindful that as much as we are not leaning into partisanship, we are not leaning into solely voting information, we're leaning into all of the civic health information. Many of our partners were hesitant to come if it was going to be recorded.
How about the variation on that, which would also be trying to engage the youth vote, which I gather is always a big challenge, of either at the event off to the side or having completed the event, do follow-up conversations, in interviews on the next day, sort of a thing.
Yeah.
Call it student journalism, although I'm thinking of that in the widest possible
Yeah.
definition of young interested folks who would have some outlet,
Yeah.
or you would give them room on your website
Yeah.
to convey, and that way the choice is with the interview subject to grant it or
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
And we already know what they've said, so they're willing to talk about what they said.
Yeah.
And some people may be very interested in saying, let me say this about that. That would get out there in another format than the printed report.
Yeah.
So let me submit that
Yeah.
idea for possibilities.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ways you could organize that, obviously. And
Yeah.
if you're doing something with the Press Association, they can obviously contribute some notions.
Yes.
Incentives besides food and
Yeah,
beverage?
yeah.
What are y'all
Yeah,
thinking on
well,
that?
we don't know. I mean, I'd love to hear from people.
What do you think, Rick?
We have done things in the past, Amazon gift cards, Walmart
Right.
gift cards. I am always very conscientious and respectful of the endowment that we hold and my responsibility to protect that and use it wisely. So,
I guess I
I'm
think-
conscientious about throwing that out there a lot because that can get expensive really fast. But we also want good data, or good conversation. So we've really we have also considered we are going to be launching a certificate program that is sort of a civic education, civic dialogue certificate program that'll have multiple tiers. We're working with the Municipal League to do one for them. For city council members, things like that. We've also considered, like if you're interested and think you might want to, as a citizen, be trained in civil dialogue, so you're more comfortable in that space, free enrollment in that certificate program when it rolls out. Yeah, so we are open. We're open to ideas on what
Well,
would
I
incentivize.
think choice is always nice, even if it's a choice of what gift certificate you get.
Yeah.
Rather than everyone gets an Amazon. Some people may not shop online.
Yeah. Yeah.
I personally love Whole Foods.
Uh-huh.
So our boss is great. She asked us what we want for our birthday, dinner out with the team,
Yeah.
internal or a gift card.
Right.
Gift card. I don't know if you all can do straight cash. That may be tricky.
That probably isn't a starter.
Some people, well, I'm just giving ideas. There's
Yeah.
not a whole lot. I mean,
I know it's
besides
hard
gift cards.
it's hard to
So these
incentivize.
days you try to think what people want.
Yeah.
I think raffles are always a good idea, like maybe like a local gift
A drawing?
basket.
Uh-huh.
Oh, now that is a rather good idea. Is everybody gets the ticket on the way in the door,
Yeah.
and then you can have a rather nice prize.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think you were saying the incentive of the coursework or the training, so maybe it'd be more work on your part, but ask people, as they come in, what's your preference?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think choice is so nice these days.
Yeah.
Is there a possibility of a linkage with this major push out of the health department and here in our community, the Med Center, which has got this healthy cafe going at the 12th Street
12th Street,
station?
yeah.
And I just carried a poster for, a posting for some event where they're trying to, get their message out in the community. Now, I do not recommend that we just give rabbit food out for your refreshments. But it shouldn't be just the worst of junk food either. And when you talk about being conservative of your funding,
Yeah.
these people might love to have this opportunity to promote the best of healthy snacking and refreshments on their dime
Yeah. Yeah.
or something
Yeah.
along those
Yeah.
lines.
And we're open to that as well. We're talking to the Arkansas Arts Council. They're about to embark on some listening sessions. We've also talked to them about doubling up even. Like, how can we partner in some places where some people are already doing some listening sessions? Then can we together come up with some incentivization, is that a word, of it, so.
Yeah, I think if the food is a notch up, that's incentive too, and I think it makes it memorable for the people. I've done a few events at the extension. I'm on the local foods team, so we do programming in that space. People always walk away and love, we've done the Root Cafe.
Yeah.
Try, it's not always budget friendly, but it makes an impression on them. And then they share that with their friends, and that may be an avenue for getting more.
And it meets the classic grassroots organizing base question, what do you get back for what you give? If you're giving an hour or 90 minutes of your time to these folks, what do you take away from it? Because yes, civics is a duty, but it all goes down better with a swallow of good stuff. So how might that be contrived? You might email her some of your successes and see what comes of that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, for some local venues, I've had some downtown. I've been looking at Nexus Coffee. They've been really good.
Yeah,
to work
they are a
with.
good partner.
And then the UALR downtown space.
Yeah.
They're really, really accommodating and easy to work with. And
You're
then
talking about the one there on Clinton Avenue in the River Market.
in the River Market.
Yeah.
It's a great space, and
Yeah.
they're
We've done a
teched
couple-
out.
They
Okay.
are teched out. Yeah, we've done a couple of, in partnership with the Clinton School, some of those deliberative dialogue things there.
And then we've had luck with breweries. Just
Yeah.
Because it's just like
Yeah.
Stone's Throw has been a really
Right.
great partner.
Yeah.
For our community conversations.
Yeah.
It just like kind of breaks down those barriers. Sometimes if you walk into like a classroom, people are like, "Oh, is there like a different power dynamic
Right.
here?"
Yeah.
So it's just kind of taking advantage of existing public spaces. And then
But the
last-
noise problem is an issue.
So
I've been to some of the Stones Throw events, and I'm
Some people aren't there. for
strained to
the
hear.
conversation. But there's a separate room, so they've like, we've been trying to get like, if people aren't there for the conversation, they'll hopefully go in the other room if there's
Yeah.
a pocket door.
Yeah.
But
Try
there's
to
a
do
couple regulars that
Yeah.
will still.
The Unitarian Church on Mississippi
Yeah, I
hosts
did
a lot of
with them
events.
during the tornado disaster. Yeah.
I was curious, you had mentioned, you said it was difficult to get the political side to listen to this. Do you have any, without getting political, do you have any musings on that or,
On that?
understand, or maybe avenues to fix that? And that might come out in your
Yeah, I
listening
mean, we've had a
session.
lot of dialogue around that. And we talked about that some at the February event. I mean, I think one, we're at a time and place nationally that we've not been in a long time. I mean, just things like, in fact, just yesterday, another email came to me from a national organization I'm a member of about are we on the brink of civil war? And the answer from that group was absolutely. And what will that look like? And so I think, one, nationally, we're in a space we've not been in a very, very long time that's critical, that no one knows quite what to think about it or what the solutions are. I think that national noise has also become so loud. So for us, one of the goals is, can we somehow begin to elevate local voice to become louder, at least within that local community, than the national voice?
Amen, sister.
So for us, that was a lot of the dialogue in February that a lot of the people there in February felt like was important. Like, we cannot, from our stance or our space of where we sit with the Rockefeller Institute, attack or, trying to attempt to bite at a national sort of dialogue. We can, though, through our partnership with, Association of Counties, Municipal League, try to get very grassroots. And again, can we elevate local voice to become louder within that community than the national voice? Part of why we're doing listening sessions is exactly that. We don't have the answers. There's a lot of pressure. I will tell you, from the minute I came on in January and we announced this initiative, and there's a lot of pressure from a lot of corporations, groups for us to put out an answer right now. And what I'm holding fast to, one, is the governor's ethic, that answers are only good if they come from a collective group. So I don't need to sit
You gotta
in a
come
space.
up from the bottom.
Yeah.
You can't do it down from
Yeah.
the top. You've got to do it with people and not do it to people.
And which governor?
Governor Rockefeller.
Okay.
Yes, Terry, looking backward.
So I don't know if that answered your question. I mean, I think for us, what we are trying to be very deliberate about is asking the right questions, because I also think that was something that is a piece of our legacy, is asking the right questions. We can all come to solutions. Solutions are not hard to reach. It's just often we're reaching solutions to questions that were not the right questions to begin with. So we are working really hard to try to ask the right questions.
How are you doing grassroots with Association of Counties?
We, so they were represented in February, in that dialogue, there. And so trying to go back and work with them around, they are interested some in partnering, providing the information around like candidate information. Can they partner with League of Women Voters? Can they do more with cooperative extension, get access to information out? They're not a group that is yet identified exactly which piece of a pillar they really want to take. Some of that may be county by county. So for example, the judge from Clinton, from Van Buren County, really, and honestly, he was one that would tell you, he came to the convening not very interested in being there. In fact, and I don't know, Chloe, if you were in his group or not, like he literally in the first sort of breakout facilitated dialogues was sitting with his arms crossed, kind of pulled away from the table from the rest of his group. By the end of it, he was the first one to say, I'm signing on as an activator. Like, this has reminded me how important local voice is and that I've gotten away from that.
So there was a county judge, that wasn't the Association of Counties.
The Association of Counties had a staff person there, and then Deborah was there from your office.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the county judge was there on behalf of county judges. And taking that back to
And the reason I ask
them.
that, because I know part of your, even though it's civic related as well, with the Association of Counties, they do all our work for county clerks.
Right. Yeah.
And I noticed you're not on the agenda for May.
No, we're not on the agenda for May.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
To me, that would be a way to engage, all,
Right.
not all county clerks,
Yeah.
as many county clerks as possible,
Yeah.
because not all county clerks attend that
Right.
particular meeting.
Yeah.
But I also think that the Association of Counties also has a partisan slant to it, depending on who's in, which group is in power in terms of the governorship.
Is it possible that a county clerk could be hosting one of these listening sessions? Because you
Yeah.
said there was a mayor.
Yeah, in fact, in Faulkner County, the county clerk there, which Faulkner County actually has some of the highest voter turnout for the state of Arkansas, they're in dialogue with the Community Foundation affiliate group and the university about all kind of co-hosting a listening session.
So, gee, Madam Clerk, maybe you want to do that or facilitate that happening if you don't put it yourself front and center.
It's possible. But I was curious about the June dates, though. Why June?
We're just doing one, just timing wise. We launched in February, and so then giving ourselves time, then trying to do kind of a cluster May to August of listening sessions, and then having another reconvening of the group, and then again post that, then we'll kind of be announcing some other things. We hope to have our at least phase one of our certificate stuff going. We have a couple of civic activator partners that are considering their pillars and what that's going to look like. We have some funders that are kind of circling, waiting to see what recommendations emerge. to announce. So, I mean, it was purely just the timing of my onboarding, that first convening,
Oh.
what next steps are.
They always say that the summer months that's when people really aren't engaged. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
I would think that that's fair. But now, am I correct in thinking that the August event outcome is going to include, and I look at your recommendations, and it's not limited to
Right.
the registration and get out the vote and vote on the November election day, but that is a component or might be a pillar.
Yes.
So there would be activation on that pillar, let's call it, as an outcome of your August event. Do you have a particular date in August?
I do. I think it's August 17th.
So we should pursue watching that close
Yeah.
and seeing
And
what
if
we
you-
might draw from
Yeah.
and take into account.
Yeah. And I'll pull this back up, but the QR code we had here, you can sign up for Civic Arkansas, and you get updates on any of our announcements, convenings, listening sessions.
Is that the same as the Institute's newsletter? Okay.
No.
Will any of this info be in that
Some
newsletter?
of the information will be in the newsletter, but we're also going to launch a separate Civic Arkansas newsletter, because as we have activators take on pillars, like one, Little Rock has some great stuff right now around some grant opportunities. So we also want to elevate those things to all of Civic Arkansas interested people around like ideas. And so they may not be in Little Rock or Pulaski County, but that whole idea and that funding stream is accessible to any municipality. And so hopefully sort of spark ideas from our kind of activator group to local community people. So sorry, let me get this QR code pulled back up, make it easy, or you can just go to the and Chloe, do you want to talk about that? Okay, because I can't.
Chloe?
Yes?
Do you want to talk about that grant opportunity real quick?
Oh yeah, so you guys might already be familiar with it, but the Love Your Block grant opportunities?
Love Your Block.
So that's Love Your Block. It's there are $1,500 like small impact grants available to neighborhood-based organizations, community-based organizations. How it's divided are we have 7 wards. 5 will be awarded to each of the 7 wards. So that's how they get the 35. And that money can be used for resident-led initiatives, things that have won in the past. Actually, Danielle can probably speak more to it. But last year you did a bee.
Okay. Petaway Neighborhood Association.
Yeah.
I have to include that because that wasn't me.
Petaway
but,
Neighborhood Association.
We won first place for 2023.
Yeah.
And prior to me being the president, previous presidents like Fred Gentry and other presidents prior to that have won first place, second place, or third place. We got all the awards at the Resource Center. And at the ceremony that I went to, I don't know what month it was, but I was there. It was also informed that Mr. Howard, Kevin Howard, the director or
Housing Neighborhood Department Director.
he stated that they are working, the mayor is working, right now we get $1,500.
Yeah.
They're trying to work it up to $2,500 or $2,000 and then eventually get it up to $5,000.
Wow.
And that way to give communities more chances to develop and make neighbors feel proud and braggadocious moments like here and so forth. So,
Yeah. That's great.
Great
Yeah.
thing. And we've already got our idea. We're not sharing until one of the
Can you tell
neighbors.
us about beekeeping that you won on?
Oh, yes. So the vice president of Petaway, Sarah Shearer, she nominated for the Beehive. I didn't nominate the Beehive. I nominated something else that got voted down, which is great. But she nominated the Beehive, and she got in contact with the Calm Plus Confidence business, which is ran by Laura. I don't remember her last name, but she's an awesome woman. But she's actually teaching courses at the Clinton Library about bees and different things like that to produce the honeys and stuff.
Yeah.
Very, very top-notch woman. So we use her services. We have a contract with her for 2 years. And what she does and her team, they teach us, they give us maintenance instructions. And one of the maintenance people, he actually lives in Petaway, Leroy. He actually he had to move the beehive because we got the grant for the 10,000 for the gardening. But
Is it Leroy Emerson?
yeah, that's him. That's him. Yes. So I got to go to the beehive and see if he moved it because we also got the $10,000 grant that I applied for the gardening. So anyway, I'm going so many different places right now. But anyway, the beehive is a wonderful experience. Calm plus confidence. Laura. You should check them out. She's really awesome, and she does have classes at the Clinton Library.
And where is the beehive today?
It's in the Petaway Garden that is still being renovated with the $10,000 grant.
What address?
Yeah,
What address?
yeah. So,
You can't remember the street it's on.
okay, it's 18. Okay, so it's on Rock Street
On Rock Street.
between 17th and 18th Street, and the prior president, former president, Jim, we call him Cricket, and Fred Gentry, they had the paperwork in the folder. I think the address is stated as 1812, but when we went downtown to the clerk thing to get the print glitches here and there, but we're working on it. It's got plenty of beds, which was donated by the Spinks Foundation that's tagged along with the grant.
Cool.
It's just a lot going on. But
Now, that's quite imaginative. The more typical Love Your Block grant in an older era, which is what I'm harking back to, they would create a really good-looking entry to the neighborhood. You know, you really only got a formal entry to the neighborhood with the development of a subdivision that had also a community center and a tennis court and a swimming pool.
Yeah.
So you hark back to the older neighborhoods in the original part of Little Rock, and they don't have any of that. And this was something that was frequently chosen as one of the initial wards. And there was a component whereby you matched the money coming from City Hall with volunteer hours. Is that still the case?
That, right?
That's still the.
So you see, that's the link that you're talking about.
Yeah. And those kind of, civic spaces, we also looked at that in the Civic Health Index. That was an add-on that we specifically requested. And didn't get as robust a data as we hoped, so we're hoping the next Civic Health Index we get more. But just the decline of civic spaces also, and what's the impact on people when that happens. I think like the Downtown Partnership Little Pocket Park is such a good example of some really creative things. We've seen that happen in El Dorado and Fort Smith, where you can take just sort of those unused spaces and try to turn them into at least a place, because some of what we know is social connectedness needs also that space where people can connect. Are there safe spaces for people to come together? And I always say, I worked the tornado disaster for the city as the lead volunteer coordinator for that when that happened. I was still at the Governor's Commission at that time. And, I've always said over the course of my career in this space, if we could behave all the time the way we do during disaster, we'd have so many more of our problems solved. But it's in that moment of a singular focus, very clear guidance usually from all of the disaster organizations.
And you're taken out of routine.
But you end up side by side along people of all backgrounds with this singular focus, and suddenly you have this connectedness and relationship, and all the things that we think dominate the conversation fall away. And if we, could ever find the magic bullet to recreate that for just everyday engagement, how much farther along we could get, because you do see during that time just the increase.
But there's an ebb and a flow in the life that people conduct.
Yeah.
But you've reminded me to ask you about all of those volunteer groups that come into a tornado blasted area and provide the hot meals, that provide the volunteer chainsaw cutters, and just the cleanup crews coming out with sacks and gloves and maybe a feeding to a city dumpster that's appeared on the street.
Yeah.
Were you able to find those groups and talk to those people and learn their data?
We are, yeah.
Good,
I mean,
good.
I think that's one of the things that's valuable in the disaster space. Again, it is a lesson we could all learn in just daily volunteer management. You know, the voluntary organizations active in disaster is an organized group of all of those entities. And they stay in constant communication throughout, you know, however many years, months, time it may be from disaster to disaster, where they are always communicating with each other, updating each other's training, keeping
Equipment, supplies,
and
fresh.
so when you have to activate them, there's a single place to go. So, you know, I didn't have to be as the lead for that at 25 different organizations. I could show up on a, you know, weekly VOAD call to activate 25 organizations that I could also activate across the state. And so again, that's sort of
Great
that
resource.
model of, if we could model some other things around that model, then ongoing volunteerism,
And now we're coming to the close of our meeting.
Yeah.
And we're going to repeat that the PowerPoint will be provided in an email that we'll send out to members. This recording will be posted on our Facebook page at clrn.ar. Thank you very much, Shana,
you,
from the Winthrop Rockefeller Institute.
Thank you all.
Thank you, County Clerk Terry Hollingsworth, for contributing this morning.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Glad to be here.
Thank you, Chloe Chapman, who's already recruited to the cause there, and our other members. Thank you, Robert Walker, coming in. And we stand adjourned. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys for input.